My worst fear, though, I have to say, is what if the government abandoned New Orleans, or they evacuated you guys, and then they put limits on the city, and then they go back open up. So yeah, that came off as really insecure and really, really dumb. I apologize. Why am I apologizing? It's gone now, but instead of doing something like that, I'll be explaining why New Orleans is so vulnerable and why it was put in the spot it is. So I think that would make more sense to you guys than what if the government abandoned New Orleans, or so let's get started on the lesson. So in order to understand why New Orleans was put the place where it was, we had to get some New Orleans history books. And we'll also be using Beautiful Crescent, History of New Orleans. New Orleans, the first 300 years. So the first book, guys, 300 Years, New Orleans, features a bunch of prominent New Orleans authors, and one of them is Richard Campanella. Legit, he is like the author of over 10 books of New Orleans history, and he has a book titled just Bourbon Street. Like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Like, just Bourbon Street itself, just the history of Bourbon Street. He also has a book titled Abraham Lincoln in New Orleans, but he's really more focused on the history of the city's geography, and that's what I'm trying to get to, guys. Sadly, guys, I don't have any one of Richard Campanella's books, but the only work I have of his is he did a little segment in New Orleans 300 Years, and his segment is titled Geography and Environment, the Deltic Metropolis during New Orleans. How do you say that, guys? The Deltic Metropolis during New Orleans 3rd century. There we go. So this is Richard Campanella's work right here. Basically, guys, when the French first came, of course, back then there wasn't no planes or trains or nothing. It was all done by like water transportation. So ports were very important, and New Orleans was probably the most strategic location in the world. You gotta remember, this is at a time when the European powers are trying to gain control in the New World, and this river is like really important. There's New Orleans right there, guys. You can see a map of how the city was. Now, you can see how large it is. The colonial New Orleans, French colonial New Orleans, Spanish colonial New Orleans was smaller than this, but you can definitely see the gray area. That's antebellum New Orleans during the 1800s. This is not colonial New Orleans. But you can see how much it's very much surrounded by water, like Pontchartrain, like Bourne, the swamps, the bayous, Mississippi River. It's completely surrounded by water. But it was really strategic, and that's why they put New Orleans here. Now, in the beginning, guys, New Orleans was built on high ground. I mean, they didn't build back into the swamps because it was low-lying areas. But then over time, the city would expand. They had drainage pumps, and they pumped the back swamp, and they were able to expand the city of New Orleans. New Orleans is definitely the most vulnerable city in America. It is really vulnerable to flooding, and it's prone to hurricanes. It's just surrounded by water every side. View of New Orleans, the Mississippi River. You can see how close it is to the waterfront.